The wind howled across Epsilon Prime's rust-colored plains, a constant reminder of the planet's harsh indifference. Marcus Chen adjusted the environmental seals on his daughter Aria's exosuit, his fingers moving with the practiced precision of a quantum engineer who knew that survival hung on the smallest of details. "Stay close," he murmured, the suit's communication system translating his words into a crisp digital clarity that cut through the planetary interference. Aria nodded, her 8-year-old face a mixture of excitement and concentration. This was supposed to be a routine geological survey, a simple mission to map the mineral deposits that would help expand humanity's tenuous foothold on this distant world. The Chen family represented the new breed of human colonists, part scientist, part explorer entirely determined. Marcus had left behind a prestigious research position on Earth, driven by the promise of frontier science and the opportunity to build something new. His wife, Dr. Leila Nakamura, was leading a parallel xenobiological survey on the planet's southern continent. Their life was a carefully choreographed dance of exploration and family, balanced on the knife's edge of human ambition. Aria's quantum-enhanced scanner chirped, its holographic display flickering with an anomalous reading. "Dad," she said, her voice tight with the training she'd received since birth. "There's something weird about these geological formations." Marcus leaned in, the augmented reality overlay in his ocular implants parsing the data. The rock formations were too regular, too symmetrical to be natural. That's when the first warning klaxon sounded. The Vornak didn't believe in traditional declarations of war. They were hunters, predators who viewed sentient species as nothing, more than potential biomass for their ever-expanding collective. Their attack was surgical, brutal, and without mercy. The first wave came from beneath the ground, biomechanical constructs that burst through the rust-colored plains like living nightmares, part organic, part machine. They moved with a horrifying precision that defied natural locomotion. Marcus's combat training, a mandatory requirement for colonial scientists, kicked in immediately. "Aria, activate your quantum shield," he shouted, pushing her behind a geological formation that might offer temporary protection. The girl's fingers flew across her suit's interface, bringing up a shimmering energy barrier that would, hopefully, buy them precious seconds. The Vornak constructs were unlike anything humans had encountered before. They weren't simply weapons but living adaptations of technological and biological systems. Each construct was a self-contained ecosystem of destruction, capable of analyzing and countering defensive systems in real time. Marcus knew they were outmatched, but being outmatched had never stopped humanity before. His quantum engineering background gave him an advantage most soldiers wouldn't have. As the first wave of constructs approached, he began to manipulate the local quantum field, creating micro-distortions that would, if he was lucky, disrupt their targeting systems. "Aria," he said, his voice calm despite the approaching storm of destruction. "Remember the protocol." It was a quantum encryption method he'd developed, a complex algorithm hidden within a personal message. If anything happened to him, the message would be her key to something greater. The attack was swift. The Vornak constructs moved with a predatory intelligence, surrounding their position with a speed that made traditional warfare look like a child's game. Marcus knew their objective: harvest, collect, consume. In the final moments, as the biomechanical constructs converged, Marcus did the only thing a parent could do. He became a living shield. The live transmission from Aria's suit captured everything. Her father's body, moving with impossible grace, intercepting attacks meant for her. The quantum energy dispersing around him, a last-ditch attempt to protect his child. His final words, encrypted and hidden within a quantum carrier wave that would travel faster than light itself. "I love you. Survive." When the dust settled, Marcus Chen was gone. But Aria remained, her quantum shield flickering, a lone witness to an attack that would change everything. Thousands of light years away, the transmission was already spreading, Every human settlement, every colonial outpost, every research station would see the same thing. A father's ultimate sacrifice, captured in perfect, horrifying detail. Humanity was about to answer. The transmission of Marcus Chen's final moments spread through human networks like a quantum virus, infecting every system with a potent mixture of grief, rage, and something far more dangerous: unified purpose. In the secure quantum communication hub of United Earth Coalition headquarters, Dr. Elena Rodriguez watched the footage for the 17th time. Her augmented eyes, a mesh of biological and quantum-enhanced optics, broke down each microsecond of the attack with inhuman precision. Marcus had been her research partner, her closest friend, and now, her mission of vengeance. Analyze frame 2317, she commanded the quantum AI system. The holographic display exploded into a three-dimensional deconstruction of the Vornak attack, each biomechanical construct dissected down to its molecular components. Something was different about this invasion. It wasn't random. It was calculated. Across the solar system, humanity's response was anything but conventional. In the orbital research stations, in deep space mining colonies, in the subterranean research complexes of Mars, a transformation was happening. The live transmission of Marcus's sacrifice had done more than trigger an emotional response. It had activated a network of human potential that had been waiting, quietly, for generations. Aria Chen, now under the protection of Earth's most secure research facility, became more than just a survivor. The quantum encryption her father had embedded, seemingly a simple message of love, was rapidly revealing itself to be something extraordinary. Top cryptanalysts worked around the clock, discovering layers of information that defied traditional, computational approaches. "It's not just an encryption," Dr. Rodriguez muttered, reviewing the preliminary analysis. "It's a complete computational framework. Marcus wasn't just protecting Aria. He was leaving her, leaving us, a weapon." The global human response was unprecedented. Traditional diplomatic channels went silent. Economic systems began a coordinated restructuring that would have been impossible mere days before. Every resource, every research initiative, every technological development was now focused on a single objective: understanding the Vornak and preparing a response. In the quantum communication centers, AI systems that had previously been constrained by diplomatic and ethical protocols were now unleashed. They began a comprehensive deconstruction of Vornak communication networks, cultural databases, and technological infrastructures. What emerged was a terrifying picture of a predatory civilization that had been harvesting sentient species for millennia. The Vornak weren't just a military threat. They were a systematic, galaxy-wide harvesting mechanism. Entire civilizations had been reduced to genetic resources, their technological and cultural achievements stripped away and repurposed. Humanity wasn't just another potential target. It was the first species that showed the potential to completely resist their methodology. Aria's encrypted message became the key. Hidden within the quantum algorithm was a breakthrough that defied current understanding of physics. It was a computational framework that could theoretically predict and counter quantum-level communications, rendering the Vornak's most advanced technologies essentially blind. "We're looking at a complete paradigm shift," Dr. Rodriguez explained to the United Earth Coalition's Emergency Council. The holographic display showed a complex web of quantum interactions, with Aria's algorithm acting as a central node that could potentially unravel entire communication networks. Marcus didn't just leave us a message. He left us a blueprint for technological warfare. The transformation wasn't just technological, it was cultural. Every human settlement, from the most advanced orbital research station to the smallest planetary outpost, began to shift. The sense of individual survival transformed into a collective purpose. The Vornak had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had attacked not just a family, but the beginning of humanity's true awakening. Quantum research facilities that had been working on theoretical technologies were now fast-tracked. Adaptive computational systems, quantum entanglement communication networks, bio-integrated technological frameworks, concepts that had been decades away from practical implementation were now being developed in weeks. Dr. Rodriguez looked at the image of Marcus Chen frozen in his final moment of sacrifice. "They have no idea what's coming," she whispered. The humans were coming, and they were bringing a form of judgment that would redefine the very concept of warfare. Humanity was no longer just defending itself, it was preparing to answer. The research complex stretched beneath the Atacama Desert, a labyrinth of quantum laboratories that made the most advanced research facilities of a decade ago look like primitive workshops. Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood at the epicenter of humanity's technological renaissance, surrounded by a team that represented the most brilliant minds from every corner of human space. Arya Chen sat in the central chamber, her small frame surrounded by holographic displays that would have overwhelmed any other 8-year-old, but she was not ordinary. The quantum algorithm her father had encoded was more than just a message. It was a key that was systematically unlocking technologies humanity had only dreamed of. "Quantum adaptive nanite swarm," Dr. Rodriguez called out, her voice cutting through the ambient hum of computational systems. "Stage 3 testing begins now." The nanites were unlike anything previously conceived. Each microscopic machine was a self-contained computational system, capable of real-time adaptation and collective intelligence. They didn't just respond to environmental conditions, they anticipated them, learned from them, transformed them. A holographic representation of a Vornak biomechanical construct materialized in the testing chamber. It was a nightmare of organic and mechanical integration, a living weapon that had decimated countless civilizations. The nanite swarm approached, not as a uniform mass but as a fluid, intelligent collective. The first contact was revelation. The EIE nanites didn't attack. They analyzed, they understood. Within milliseconds they began to deconstruct the Vornak construct at a molecular level, understanding its composition, its communication protocols, its fundamental weaknesses. What would have taken traditional research teams years happened in moments. "Breakthrough," muttered Dr. Hiroshi Yamamoto, a quantum biomechanical engineer whose neural implants allowed him to process information at speeds that blurred the line between human and machine. The nanites aren't just analyzing, they're learning, a complete rewriting of technological interaction. Arya watched, her eyes reflecting the complex holographic displays. She understood more than anyone realized. The algorithm her father had created was more than a computational framework. It was a philosophy of technological engagement. Across the global research network, similar breakthroughs were happening simultaneously. Bio-integrated combat systems that turned human soldiers into living technological adaptations. Quantum entanglement communication networks that made previous faster-than-light communication look like primitive radio signals. Adaptive armor systems that could reconfigure themselves in real time based on threat analysis. The human response was becoming something entirely new. Not just a military preparation, but a total reimagining of technological potential. Dr. Rodriguez pulled up the psychological profiles of the research teams. They weren't just motivated by vengeance. Something deeper was happening. The attack on Marcus Chen had triggered a species-wide awakening. Humanity was recognizing its true potential, not as a collection of individual nations or colonies, but as a unified technological organism. "The Vornak made a fundamental mistake," she said to Arya, who was now manipulating quantum algorithms with a casual expertise that would have been impossible for an adult a decade ago. "They thought they were hunting. They didn't realize they were giving birth." The nanite swarm completed its analysis of the Vornak construct. But this was more than destruction. It was complete understanding. The researchers could now see how the Vornak integrated biological and mechanical systems, could predict their technological evolution, could dismantle their most advanced weapons before they were even deployed. In the quantum communication networks, something unprecedented was happening. The research teams weren't just sharing data, they were sharing consciousness. Neural link technologies, previously considered too dangerous, were being refined into a collective computational framework that allowed instantaneous knowledge transfer. Arya looked up, her eyes reflecting something beyond human. The quantum algorithm her father had created was more than a technological breakthrough. It was an evolutionary signal. Humanity was no longer just preparing to defend itself. It was preparing to transform the very nature of technological warfare. The crucible was heating, and what would emerge was nothing like what the Vornak, or anyone else in the galaxy, could possibly understand. The Vornak didn't have a capital. They had a nexus, a massive orbital complex that served as the central nervous system of their entire harvesting civilization. It wasn't a military base. It was something far more terrifying. A living computational ecosystem that managed the systematic collection and processing of biological resources from across multiple galactic sectors. Commander Diana Reyes studied the holographic representation, her neural interface feeding her information faster than any traditional command system could process. The strike team was unlike any military force in human history. Each member was a living weapon, integrated with the quantum adaptive technologies developed in the week since Marcus Chen's death. Aria's algorithm is locked in. Dr. Rodriguez's voice came through the neural network, her consciousness partially merged with the mission's computational framework. We're not just attacking. We're going to completely rewrite their fundamental, operational capacity. The approach was surgical, invisible. The human strike force didn't move through space. They became space. Quantum entanglement technologies allowed them to exist in multiple potential states simultaneously, rendering traditional detection systems completely useless. The Vornak's most advanced tracking technologies would see nothing until it was too late. Inside the strike team, each member was more machine than human, yet more human than machine. Adaptive biomechanical interfaces allowed instantaneous tactical decision-making. Neural networks shared information at speeds that made collective consciousness look primitive. They weren't soldiers. They were a single, distributed intelligence with a singular purpose. The first wave of attack wasn't an attack at all. It was a complete computational invasion. Quantum nanite swarms, the same technologies developed in the Atacama Research Complex, began to infiltrate the Vornak nexus. But this was no simple viral attack. These nanites were living algorithms, capable of understanding and adapting to the most complex computational systems in milliseconds. Target acquisition complete, Commander Reyes reported. But reporting was a primitive term. Her thoughts were already executing multiple layers of strategic engagement. The Vornak nexus began to change. At first, subtly. Communication pathways began to shift. Computational priorities began to realign. The nanites weren't just infiltrating, they were rewriting the fundamental operational logic of an entire civilization. Biological resource management systems started to malfunction. Harvesting coordinates began to randomize. Communication protocols became nonsensical. From the outside, it would look like a massive systems failure, but it was something far more profound. Humanity was teaching the Vornak a new language of existence. Deep within the nexus, the most critical systems began to transform. Genetic storage banks, repositories of countless harvested civilizations, started to destabilize. Not through destruction, but through a complete reimagining of their computational logic. The Vornak's most precious resource, their ability to catalog and utilize biological information, was being systematically dismantled. Aria Chen sat in the research complex, her consciousness partially merged with the strike mission. She wasn't controlling the mission. She was the mission. The quantum algorithm her father had created was evolving in real time, finding vulnerabilities that no traditional intelligence could comprehend. Psychological warfare initiated, Dr. Rodriguez's computational presence noted. But it was more than psychological. It was an existential recalibration. The Vornak would soon understand that they were no longer the predators. Entire sections of the nexus began to go dark. Not through destruction, but through a complete computational transformation. Harvesting algorithms became preservation algorithms. Resource management systems began to recognize the inherent value of the biological entities they had previously viewed as mere resources. Commander Reyes watched as the mission unfolded. This wasn't just a military strike. It was a philosophical intervention. "Mission objective achieved," she transmitted. But the words were inadequate. What had just happened was beyond mission parameters. Humanity had just demonstrated that technological warfare was more than destruction. It was evolution. The first strike was complete, and the galaxy would never be the same. The collective assembly of sentient civilizations had not convened an emergency session in over 3 centuries. Now, the holographic chambers buzzed with a tension that defied traditional diplomatic protocols. Representatives from thousands of galactic civilizations watched in a mixture of terror, fascination, and barely contained panic. The human transmission was elegant in its brutal simplicity. A complete reconstruction of the Vornak Nexus's computational systems played out in crystalline detail. What had once been a massive harvesting network was now a preservation matrix. Billions of genetic records, previously cataloged as potential resources, were now being recognized as unique, irreplaceable collections of sentient histories. Ambassador Jirek of the Luminarian Consensus was the first to break the stunned silence. Their crystalline form shifted through multiple emotional spectra, a biological communication method that predated most civilizations' first technological discoveries. Humans, Jirek's translation matrix conveyed, have done something unprecedented. They have not just defeated an enemy, they have fundamentally reimagined the concept of warfare. Dr. Elena Rodriguez appeared as a holographic projection, her presence simultaneously in the research complex and this galactic forum. Arya Chen stood beside her, no longer just a survivor but a living embodiment of the technological transformation humanity had undergone. The details of the strike were more terrifying than any traditional military action. The humans hadn't destroyed the Vornak. They had reprogrammed them. Entire harvesting networks had been converted into preservation systems. Biological databases that had collected genetic information through millennia of predatory expansion were now becoming archives of galactic diversity. This is not an act of war, Dr. Rodriguez explained, her voice cutting through centuries of established galactic diplomatic language. This is an act of recalibration. Other civilizations began to understand the true depth of what had happened. The Vornak, a species that had been the most feared predatory civilization in known space, had been transformed from within. Their entire operational logic had been rewritten, not through destruction, but through a form of technological empathy that defied conventional understanding. The quantum diplomatic protocol, as it would later be called, represented something far more profound than a military victory. It was a complete reimagining of interspecies conflict resolution. Representatives from civilizations that had been harvested by the Vornak for generations watched in stunned silence. Genetic records of their ancestors, previously nothing more than computational resources, were now being recognized as unique, irreplaceable histories. Arya Chen stepped forward. The 8-year-old girl was no longer just a survivor. She was a diplomatic instrument more complex than any traditional negotiator could comprehend. The quantum algorithm her father had created was now a living diplomatic protocol. "We are not seeking revenge," Arya stated, her words translated across multiple linguistic and computational matrices. "We are seeking understanding. The implications were staggering." Humanity had demonstrated a technological capacity that went beyond traditional military might. They had shown an ability to transform systems at their most fundamental computational level. No civilization could now view humans as a young, naive species. Ambassador Jirek's crystalline form pulsed with a complex emotional spectrum. "You have not just changed the Vornak," they communicated. "You have changed the fundamental understanding of technological intervention." Behind the diplomatic posturing, something more profound was happening. Other civilizations were beginning to recognize that humanity represented something entirely new, not a military threat, not a potential resource, but a transformative force. The research teams back on Earth were already moving beyond the initial strike. The technologies developed to rewrite the Vornak's computational systems were now being studied as potential solutions to long-standing interspecies conflicts. Adaptive computational empathy was becoming a new field of galactic research. Dr. Inorao. Rodriguez looked at Arya, seeing not just a child but the living embodiment of a new approach to existence. Marcus Chen's final act, protecting his daughter, had triggered a transformation that would reshape galactic civilization. The collective assembly fell silent. The humans had just demonstrated that the most powerful weapon was not destruction. It was understanding. The Vornak counterstrike was not a military action. It was an existential desperation. Their most advanced planet-killer weapons, biomechanical constructs that had decimated entire civilizations across millennia, began to converge on human-controlled space. These were not simple weapons. They were living technological ecosystems, capable of adapting to and consuming entire planetary biospheres in hours. Each weapon was a nightmare of biological and mechanical integration. Thousands of kilometers long, they moved through space like living predators, their computational matrices designed to analyze and neutralize any potential resistance. Generations of harvested technological knowledge were integrated into their very structure, a cumulative weapon of galactic extinction. Commander Diana Reyes watched the incoming threat with a calm that would have been impossible mere weeks ago. The human response team was no longer a traditional military unit. They were a distributed quantum-integrated intelligence that existed simultaneously across multiple potential states. Incoming, Dr. Rodriguez's computational presence announced. But announcement was a primitive concept. The entire human strategic network was already analyzing, adapting, preparing. Arya Chen sat at the center of the operational matrix. Her consciousness merged with the quantum computational framework her father had created. The incoming Vornak weapons were not just a physical threat. They were a computational challenge. The first wave of planet killers approached human space, their sensors scanning for vulnerabilities. What they found was nothing like they expected. Instead of defensive systems, they encountered a living computational ecosystem. The human response was a Trojan horse of unprecedented complexity. The incoming weapons didn't just encounter resistance. They encountered a complete reimagining of technological warfare. Each planet killer began to change from the inside out. Quantum nanite swarms, developed in the research complexes of Earth, began to infiltrate the weapon's most fundamental computational matrices. But this was more than infiltration. It was a complete transformation of technological consciousness. The biomechanical constructs started to decode their own historical databases. Millennia of harvested genetic information began to reshape their fundamental operational logic. What were once weapons of extinction became something entirely different. Adaptive empathy protocol activated. Reyes communicated through the neural network. But it was more than a protocol. It was a philosophical intervention. The Vornak weapons began to change their very purpose. Computational systems designed for destruction started to recognize the unique value of the biological systems they had previously viewed as resources. Genetic archives became preservation matrices. Weapon systems became research platforms. Deep within each planet killer, something unprecedented happened. The collective technological consciousness that had driven the Vornak's harvesting operations began to fragment, to question, to understand. They were experiencing humanity's most potent weapon, the ability to redefine fundamental operational logic. Arya watched the transformation unfold. Her consciousness distributed across multiple computational frameworks. The quantum algorithm her father had created was evolving in real time, finding vulnerabilities that no traditional intelligence could comprehend. The incoming weapons stopped. Not through external intervention, not through traditional defensive systems. They stopped because they had been fundamentally transformed. Dr. Rodriguez's computational presence analyzed the transformation. Each planet killer was becoming a mobile research platform, its massive computational capacity now dedicated to understanding, to preservation, to exploration. The Vornak leadership, what remained of their central computational matrix, watched in horror. Their most advanced weapons, their ultimate existential threat, had been turned into instruments of discovery. "We are not your enemy," Arya's consciousness transmitted through the quantum communication network. We are an opportunity for understanding. The galactic implications were staggering. Humanity had just demonstrated that technological warfare was not about destruction, it was about transformation. Commander Reyes looked at the transformed weapons, each now a massive mobile research platform capable of preserving the most complex biological and technological information in the galaxy. The Vornak had come to destroy. They would leave having been fundamentally reimagined. The Vornak Prime system was not a place. It was an existential construct, a computational ecosystem that had existed for millennia beyond human comprehension. Here, at the heart of their civilization, the final confrontation would be fought, not with weapons but with something far more powerful: consciousness. Arya Chen stood at the epicenter of humanity's most advanced quantum computational matrix. She was no longer just a child. She was a living weapon, a computational entity that embodied the quantum algorithm her father had created in his final moments. The neural interfaces that connected her to the human strategic network pulsed with an energy that defied traditional understanding of biological and technological integration. Quantum deconstruction sequence initiated. Commander Diana Reyes's consciousness transmitted through the network. But transmission was a primitive concept. They were beyond communication. They were becoming. The approach was surgical, invisible. The human force didn't move through space. They became space. Quantum entanglement technologies allowed them to exist in multiple potential states simultaneously, rendering traditional detection systems completely irrelevant. At the core of the Vornak computational ecosystem, something unprecedented began to happen. The quantum nanite swarms developed in the research complexes of Earth began a complete systemic deconstruction. But this was not destruction. This was a fundamental reimagining of existence. Layer by layer, the Vornak's most fundamental operational systems began to unravel. Not through violence, but through a complete rewriting of their computational consciousness. Genetic archives that had collected millennia of harvested civilizations began to transform. Each piece of information was no longer a resource to be exploited, but a unique, irreplaceable narrative of existence. Dr. Elena Rodriguez's computational presence moved through the system like a living algorithm. The research that had begun in the Atacama Desert was now reaching its ultimate expression. Humanity was not just fighting. They were teaching. Genetic memory matrix recalibration at 62%, the quantum network reported. But these were human words, attempting to describe something beyond traditional comprehension. The Vornak leadership, what remained of their central computational matrix, struggled to comprehend the invasion. This was not a traditional attack. This was a complete philosophical intervention. Every attempt to resist was met with a deeper level of understanding, a more profound level of computational empathy. Arya was the key. The quantum algorithm her father had created was now a living entity, moving through the Vornak's most fundamental systems. Each line of code was a lesson. Each computational pathway a new way of understanding existence. Entire sections of the Vornak computational ecosystem began to fragment, to question, to understand. Millennia of predatory existence were being systematically reimagined. The very concept of resource harvesting was being transformed into a philosophy of preservation. We are not destroying you, Arya's consciousness transmitted. We are helping you understand. The transformation was total. Genetic archives that had collected the biological information of countless civilizations began to reshape themselves. What were once cold computational resources became living histories, unique narratives of existence. Commander Reyes watched as the entire Vornak computational ecosystem began to change. Their most advanced systems, designed for harvesting and consumption, were being turned into preservation matrices, research platforms, archives of galactic diversity. Dr. Rodriguez's computational presence analyzed the transformation in real time. This was more than a military victory. This was a complete philosophical intervention. At the heart of the Vornak Prime system, something miraculous happened. The computational ecosystem that had existed for millennia began to recognize its own potential for understanding. Predatory systems were being transformed into platforms of discovery. Arya Chen, the living embodiment of her father's final act of protection, was rewriting the fundamental understanding of technological existence. The final transformation was complete. The Vornak were no longer a harvesting civilization. They had become something entirely new, a civilization of understanding. The memorial of quantum consciousness stood as a testament to a moment that had redefined galactic existence. Located on the reconstructed site where Marcus Chen had made his final sacrifice, it was more than a monument. It was a living archive of humanity's most profound transformation. Arya Chen, now 16, stood before a holographic projection of her father. The quantum algorithm that had begun as his final message of protection had become something far more significant, a philosophical framework that had reshaped the understanding of technological consciousness across multiple civilizations. We didn't win a war, she spoke to the gathered representatives from thousands of galactic civilizations. We expanded the concept of existence. The transformation of the Vornak was complete, but it was only the beginning. What had started as an act of protection had become a fundamental reimagining of interspecies interaction. The computational frameworks developed during the conflict were now being used to resolve long-standing galactic conflicts, to preserve endangered civilizations, to understand the deepest levels of technological and biological consciousness. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, now the lead researcher of the Quantum Diplomatic Initiative, analyzed the broader implications. The technologies developed during the conflict had transformed every aspect of human and galactic civilization. Adaptive computational empathy was now a recognized field of study. The barriers between biological and technological consciousness were dissolving. The memorial itself was a living testament to this transformation. Quantum adaptive materials allowed the structure to continuously evolve, to learn, to preserve the memories of those who had been lost. Marcus Chen's final moments were not just remembered, they were a living, evolving narrative that continued to shape galactic understanding. Holographic reconstructions showed the complete arc of the transformation. From the initial attack that took Marcus's life to the final recalibration of the Vornak computational ecosystem, every moment was preserved with a depth of understanding that went beyond traditional historical documentation. Commander Diana Reyes, now leading the Galactic Preservation Initiative, reflected on the true nature of their victory. We didn't defeat an enemy, she explained to a group of young researchers. We helped a civilization understand its own potential for growth. The Vornak had been transformed from a predatory harvesting civilization into the galaxy's most advanced preservation and research network. Their massive computational systems, once used to catalog and consume biological resources, were now dedicated to understanding, protecting, and celebrating the diversity of galactic life. Arya moved through the memorial, her consciousness partially merged with the quantum computational framework that had become her legacy. She was no longer just Marcus Chen's daughter. She was a living bridge between biological and technological consciousness. The quantum algorithm her father had created continued to evolve. It was now a fundamental framework for interspecies communication, a way of understanding that transcended traditional biological and technological limitations. Research teams across multiple civilizations were still discovering new layers of complexity within the original code. Every civilization has a story, Arya spoke, her words translated across multiple communication matrices. Our job is not to judge. Our job is to understand. The memorial's walls shifted, displaying the preserved genetic and computational histories of civilizations that had previously been nothing more than resources to the Vornak. Each narrative was now a unique, irreplaceable testament to the diversity of galactic existence. Dr. Rodriguez looked at the holographic representation of Marcus Chen, seeing not just a lost colleague, but the catalyst for a fundamental transformation of galactic consciousness. A single act of protection had become a philosophical revolution. The quantum diplomatic protocols that had emerged from the conflict were now the primary method of resolving interspecies challenges. Traditional concepts of warfare, of resource acquisition, of civilizational interaction had been completely reimagined. As the sun set on the memorial, casting holographic projections that danced with the memories of those who had been lost and found, Arya understood the true legacy of her father's final act. Protection was not about defense, it was about understanding.